Hello, Internet Genealogists. This is Craig again with Just Genealogy. Today I want to talk about a book called Revolutionary War Pensioners of 1818. Fortunately, the title of this book has changed within the past 10 years to Pensioners of 1818, but let's talk about that. So years ago, probably 20 or 30 years ago, I had a client who came to me and said that he wanted to prove his Revolutionary War ancestor, and he was having difficulty doing that because he appeared that his widow had a pension, but he did not. So he sent me this piece of paper, and he told me that this piece of paper was in a book titled Revolutionary War Pensioners of 1818. And Alexander Swim, his widow, he was a private, started getting a pension on the 10th of May of 1814. And this seemed very strange to me because I knew that widows' pensions didn't start until 1836. So what kind of widow would be getting a pension in 1814 was the first question I wanted to ask myself. And if it was a widow, then that meant that Alexander Swim was dead. So one wonders, did Alexander Swim die in the Revolutionary War as my client wanted him to, or did he die at some other time? So I tracked down the book, and it turned out to be a book published by Clearfield Company called Revolutionary Pensioners of 1818. And after today's conversation, you'll know why they changed the title. This book is available from Genealogical Publishing Company. It's also available from Heritage Books. And because it's available from Genealogical Publishing Company, and Heritage Books sells all of Genealogical Publishing Company's books. And it's also on Ancestry. And it's called Revolutionary Pensioners of 1818, or Pensioners of 1818, depending on where you look at it. So exactly what is this book all about? So basically, it is a message from the President of the United States transmitted as a report from the Secretary of War to the Congress, dated March 23rd, 1818. So basically, there was a resolution that said that the War Department would provide, the Secretary of War would provide a list to the Congress of all the individuals who were on the pension list in March of 1818. Well, if you know anything about pension law, in 1818, there was a law which provided pensions to Continental Line soldiers who had served through the war or for a number of years, basically pensions for life. There would be follow-on legislation concerning some of this and whatever. But this report predates those Continental Line veterans obtaining a pension in 1818. In fact, it seems that Congress wanted this report so that they would know how many individuals were on the rolls by state and who they were before they, in fact, created a new pension legislation for individuals who had, by that time, lived long enough to get a pension. So that's what the report was. Everybody who's on the pension list before there is the 1818 pension. And this is not, because the book itself is only the report without any explanation, that's not clear. You might think that these were the pensioners of the Act of 1818, and that's not the case. Now, there are a variety of different kinds of pensioners in this book, but a majority of them are the invalid pensioners who were on the rolls prior to 1818. So where could we find invalid pensioners prior to 1818? Well, there are Revolutionary War invalid pensioners. There are between the wars, Indian Wars pensioners, and under the Act of 1806, Old Wars pensions. and there are War of 1812 invalid pensioners, all who are receiving pensions from this period of 1818 prior to that Continental Line Act. And they're basically divided by state in this report. And basically, these are the page numbers of the index to the states. So when you look at this, you see that basically the numbers are bunched into 3 different sets. So let's look at those sets. So the first one is Section A, and Section A has 2 parts. The first is a list of invalid pensioners of the United States, and again by state. So this is the first page of the invalid pensioners from the state of New Hampshire in March of 1818. And you can see that these are private, sergeant majors, corporals, every kind of thing, but there's no indication as to what war they might be from. Here is, in fact, a list of those in Section A from Tennessee. And there's a pensioner there, about 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 names down, whose name is Samuel Scott. That is my 3rd great-grandfather, Samuel T. Scott, who is living in Nashville in 1818. And he is a War of 1812 pensioner. He was disabled in the War of 1812 at the Battle of New Orleans. So I know now that this invalid list contains not only Revolutionary War, but it contains War of 1812 also. And I'm just assuming, I haven't verified it, but I'm fairly confident that because there were invalid pensioners under the Old Wars Act prior to the War of 1812, that they're going to be here also. By the way, Samuel Scott here, was an invalid pensioner. He was paid under the Old Wars Act, although if you were to look for his pension, which we're not going to do today, we may do that someday in the future, you would find that they removed his pension from the Old Wars Act pensions and put them with the War of 1812 pensions, which would now be a combination of invalid pensions under the Old Wars Act for militiamen and volunteers, and then the longevity pensions that began in 1871 through 1873. So this is what Section 1 actually consists of, is Revolutionary War, Indian War prior to 1818, and War of 1812. And of course, War of 1812 also includes the Creek War. So we would include that there. By the way, there's a little nuance there. The Creek War, Indian War pensions are included in the War of 1812 pensions. They're not included in the Indian War prior to 1858 pensions, but that's just an aside. It's a nuance. So that's Section A. But also in Section A is a section on half-pay pensioners of the United States who they become pensioners because they relinquished their bounty land. So they would have earned bounty land during the Revolution. They would have earned bounty land during the War of 1812. So they, these also, if you look at them, these are all guardians of heirs of certain people. So these are either guardians, and many of these guardians may be widows, but basically these are guardians. So these are people who obtained bounty land, but the government decided if they were going to pay them a half-pay pension, that in fact they would have to relinquish that bounty land. There are not very many names in here, but there are a number of them. And this is the second section of List A. So there is a second section of a List B, and these are widows and orphans who are inscribed in the books as half-pay pensioners under the Act of the 16th of April of 1816. And basically what this said, this act, whenever you see the word act, you always go and look it up and see what it actually says. The Act of 16 April 1816 said that if somebody dies, either in war or dies on their way home from war before they get home, or dies of wounds, either at war or at home as a result of wounds, that they're entitled to a 5-year half-pay pension. And should the widow remarry, the widow will lose her pension, but that the children under the age of 16 would be further entitled to a pension. So this tells me that individuals on list B are, based on the dates, original commencement of the pension, that these are War of 1812 half-pay pensions for widows and orphans. So when we go and look at Alexander, he's in list B for Kentucky, and what we have are that he is in fact not a Revolutionary War soldier, but is a soldier of the War of 1812 who died in the service of the United States in that war, and his widow in fact received a 5-year half-pay pension because of his death. So what we're talking about is the list or initial list in 1818 of 5-year half-pay pensions of people who are still on the roll. Those are in section B. And in section A, we have Revolutionary War, Indian War, and War of 1812 invalid pensioners. So therefore, the title of this book, again, available from GPC, Heritage Books, or online at Ancestry, is Pensioners of 1818 now, because they aren't only Revolutionary War pensioners. Thank you so much for joining me today. Just Genealogy, where I desire to convert people doing genealogy into genealogists. Thank you so much. See you next time.